Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist, and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the podcast. It is lovely to have you here. Before we get started, I want to tell you about something that's happening on Friday night. I'm hosting a free masterclass for anyone who would like to come along. It's titled How to Keep Your Cool at Mealtimes, and it's for you if you're feeling a little frazzled about family dinner. Perhaps you are cooking lots of different meals, or you're dealing with lots of different complaints, or you just don't know what to cook and you're feeling frustrated and you're a bit over it. You need a little bit of inspiration or a little bit of guidance. I'd love to invite you to join me for this free masterclass. You can sign up by heading to familymealtimes.com.au/masterclass. It starts at 7:30 Western Standard Time on Friday. So that's 9:30 for those of you in Melbourne or Sydney. You can adjust your time zones as you need to. If you come live, you can ask me any of the questions that you like. Bring a beverage of choice, tuck yourself up on the couch, and let's chat about feeding your family without the frazzle. So, on to today's episode. This is hopefully a super short podcast episode, but it comes after a number of DM chats I've had over the weekend and actually in real life conversations I've had with people. And essentially, I want to ask you, how much guilt do you feel about what you feed your child? And how much guilt do you feel about what your child eats? Because I'm under the impression that parents are drowning in guilt and doubt over feeding their kids. And this drives me wild for reasons that we can, get onto later in the podcast. But I'll give you an example of one of the things that I was asked over the weekend. This person said, I'd love to hear your opinion on white bread, please. I always have guilt about giving my children white bread, but they won't eat anything else. Is it about moderation? I feel really judged when I provide it. So many things to unpack here. My response to this person was, mate, ditch the guilt, choose the bread that works for your family. Nutrition is more than the color of the bread that you're choosing. Number one, you can get lots of really great white bread options. You can have lots of different toppings on white bread. White bread with something as basic as jam is just plain delicious. There is room in your diet, in your kids' diet for white bread. You never have to feel guilty about a choice like that. Now, it kind of brings up a heap of different things. And I guess one of the questions I want to ask you is, what do you think? What kind of messages are you served? What are you being told about what kids do eat, what other kids eat, or they should eat? And are these messages deliberately designed to make you feel bad? Think about all the information that you receive about food and nutrition for you and your family. And are the messages about feeling bad to motivate you to do something different? Now, hopefully, some of you will be following some really evidence-based, positive, promoting, great nutrition without the fear and shame. And hopefully some of you say, oh, not all of it. But my suspicion is from all of these conversations is that almost everybody is feeling bad and worried about what they're feeding their kids, regardless of what it actually is. And this is not what the evidence tells us. We know from our kind of surveys of what Australian kids eat, and no doubt they are somewhat outdated. We haven't had a nutrition survey for a while. But we know that on the whole, most kids are meeting their nutritional requirements fairly easily, if not exceeding them. We don't have significant levels of deficiency or problematic kind of eating patterns. We know that Australian children don't eat enough vegetables based on our general health population guidelines, but neither do Australian adults overall, very low rates. Neither do I. Personally, I do not meet the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating guidelines for vegetable consumption. Does it stress me out? Absolutely not. And this is one of the things I think I don't have to give valuable brain space to. And I really want to give you a little bit of reassurance that you don't need to spend hours stressing that you are doing something wrong either. Because we are moving away from this like fear, guilt, shame around food. It causes more problems than it helps. And I would argue that it's not dissimilar to dieting. It's kind of dieting in a different wrapping paper. If you think about kind of the way that maybe you were taught about food growing up, that you needed to control it, you needed to have, a certain amount. And definitely as a young person, I was really obsessive about getting 5 serves of vegetables, and I was really, controlling about a lot of things around food in a way that I don't do now. And I'm so glad that I'm free of that. But it really was a case of like, you have to be perfect or there's no point at all. And so it creates this kind of pendulum style of eating or feeding your family, where if you're not nailing it, you're like, stuff it all. I'll just have a Mars bar for lunch. And that kind of all or nothing, black or white thinking has plagued a lot of us for our lifetime. And it's starting to become something that we see in feeding kids, where we are so focused on getting the right bone broth or the right, nutrients from the right sort of vegetables that when it doesn't go perfectly, it's kind of like you feel like you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You're like, what's the point of all of this? Stuff it. They can just have McDonald's for lunch. And then you get the guilt. And this is the same as the dieting pattern where you're like, all right, I really need to fix this up. I need to be serving 5 different vegetables at dinner time. I need to be coaxing them to, eat all of this nutritious stuff. I need to be, talking about sugar and not too much more of that rubbish. And, all of these really extreme ways of thinking about food. And I don't think this is helping anybody. The guilt that we're carrying about not doing a good enough job actually stops us from realizing that we are doing a perfectly fine job. And I want you to know that you don't need to be better than fine when you're feeding your kids. They will not be smarter or happier if you perfect feeding them. I can promise you it will not have the kind of impact that you think it will have. What you need to do when you're feeding your kids is feed them a range of different foods at fairly predictable kind of time frames. So something like, breakfast snack, lunch snack, dinner. And ideally, you refrain from trying to impact their eating, coerce them, or encourage or praise or force them, and that you just let them listen to their body, eat as much as they need, and be done. And that's pretty much it. Like, you don't need to be focusing on serves of different foods. You don't need to be calculating micronutrients. You don't need to be buying the healthiest version of everything. You don't need to be mixing, I don't know, legumes into something that doesn't naturally have legumes in it. And it doesn't mean that you can't. Like, I enjoy a chocolate zucchini cake as much as the next person, but I'm not doing it from a point of view of trying to optimize the nutrients that come in cake or come from zucchini. And I wonder if that's where we're getting stuck, this idea of optimizing, of perfecting, of really doing an excellent job of liver is the best source of iron, so that is the one that I will use, when realistically, a lot of us don't eat liver. I'm flicking all about here. And I think what I'm finding is a lot of the advice around feeding kids is based on the myth of ideal parenting or ideal mothering. The idea that you cook everything from scratch and you buy everything from a farmer's market, and that your sole role in life is to nourish your children. And sure, that sounds idyllic, but it's straight up impossible. Life is messy. Extracurricular sport makes it tricky to do dinner well. Days where things don't run perfectly, when you are late from work, when your kids are sick, when, the online groceries haven't arrived. There are so many times in our lives where eating is not even close to perfect. And I don't think any of those things are a problem. If you have been to kids' parties back to back over the weekend, and you've eaten more fairy bread and chocolate crackles than you have anything, that would naturally be stored in the crisper, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have had takeaway more times this week than you would prefer to, nothing bad will happen. What I want us to realize is that we don't have to swing from extreme to extreme. We don't have to be finding the healthiest of everything. We don't need to be optimizing everything, perfecting food. We don't need to be treating feeding our families like an extreme sport. Because actually, you can have a range of processed foods, some fresh foods, some things you make, some things you buy, and easily meet your kids' requirements, even exceed them, and still maintain your sanity and not create kind of disordered eating patterns in your family, not raise your kids to think that they have to eat a vegetable every time they sit down. Sure, serve veggies fairly regularly, but I don't think you need to spend time stressing about not doing it enough. And so I guess my question is, why are we buying into this idea that we're not good enough? Does this apply to all parts of parenting? And I mean, it probably does. I think for a lot of us, we're worried we're not doing enough, not doing the right thing, not doing enough home reading is my current one. But the more that I learn about parenting, the more that I know about nutrition, the more the evidence tells us we never have to get it right. We just have to do a good enough job. And good enough doesn't have to be perfect eating. So I guess I'd invite you to think about the kind of messages that you're getting, how much time you spend worrying about your kids eating, and then ask yourself if it's helping you. Is it making it easier to cook? Is it making it easier to provide a range of different foods, or is it actually crushing you? Because if it's crushing you, I want to invite you to try a different way where just good enough is fine, where you don't spend hours thinking about what they do or don't eat. It feels, I think I have, only just realized that I'm one of the, one of the few people. I mean, I'm surrounded by people that I've obviously like talked into submission, but I don't spend any time stressing about my kids eating, even if we've had a weekend where it doesn't look normal for us, even if we've been on holidays and literally all my kids have eaten is pancakes. I have no worry or stress about that. Imagine what that could look like for you. Again, I'd love to invite you to the free masterclass that is happening this week on Friday, Friday night. So it's familymealtimes.com.au/masterclass. And if you want more, you want to work with me directly, have me in your back pocket, helping you through some of these dilemmas that come up, I'd love to invite you to check out my Mealtimes memberships. Head to mealtimes.com.au. Thanks for joining me today. I hope it's a bit of food for thought. We might delve into this further if this kind of rings true for a lot of people listening. Thanks for listening today. Bye.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.